turned 5 p.m. So we'll start on time because we have an action-packed evening to get through with lots of contributions from different teachers and professionals in this area. So you are more than welcome to this evening's webinar, which is all about further enhancing inclusive practice in your physical education classroom. So we're really delighted to bring this webinar to you this evening, and we're hoping that we'll have a really good evening. I know some people are already with us, have been with us for a little while, and some people are still getting logged in. Just as we kind of get used to the webinar format this evening, I'm just going to invite you for the first time this evening to maybe have a look at the Padlet page. So you are invited now to navigate to this Padlet page. So you can use the QR code that you see on screen, or you can also use the link that is being popped into the chat now by my colleague Bridget. So the purpose of this Padlet this evening is to allow us to kind of collaborate, to share ideas, to reflect on what we are learning. You know, so we'll hear from lots of physical education colleagues throughout the course of this evening, and this Padlet page is a way of kind of contextualizing what we hear and collaborating with each other. So that's the purpose of the Padlet this evening. So I'll just invite you for the first time this evening just to literally open up the Padlet page, make sure that you can get it. We won't do any activities on it just at this point, but it's to give everybody an opportunity to open it up, to have a look at it, to see the format of it, and then we will be visiting later in the session. So thanks, Bridget, for popping that link into the chat there. So hopefully everybody has been able to open that up and have a look at it, and if not, we will have an opportunity to do so again later this evening. So first of all, our introductions. So these are the people that you're going to be hearing from over the course of the evening tonight. So my name is Anya Farley. I am obviously a physical education teacher. I work with the JCT in a full-time capacity. This is just my second year. I'm going to be supported this evening by my two JCT colleagues, Bridget Corrigan, who is also on the PE team, and Gerard Duff, who is the team leader for physical education. So thank you very much, Bridget and Gerard, and they're going to be manning the chat, and we're going to be taking some feedback and supporting with the Q&A later in the session. We're also going to have contributions from three colleagues. There's a good geographical spread this evening, so we have Munster, Leinster and Connacht all represented. The only one left out is Ulster, but I suppose I'll fly that flag for the evening. So we have Molly Nightingale from Merlin College, County Galway, Emma Carey, who will be coming in via a voiceover from County Tipperary, Aoife Linan from Dublin. Okay, so we really are very appreciative to our colleagues for joining us this evening, and by being generous enough to share aspects of their practice so that we can learn from that as well. We're delighted to have them here with us this evening. For our first activity for the evening, we're going to invite you for the first time to navigate to the Padlet for an activity. So you can use the QR code that you see on screen, or you can use the link that has been popped into the chat already. So we're just going to make note of a few ideas in relation to your own independent, or indeed your department's practice here in physical education. So when you think about inclusion in physical education class, are there individual students or perhaps groups of students that come to mind? So we might think about the challenges that these learners may encounter, and we might even think about what we have done in the past or what we may do in the future that will support learners in overcoming these challenges. So I'm going to maybe set a timer now, once I stop speaking, for about 1 minute to allow us time to collate these ideas of who are the students that are coming to mind when we really think about inclusion. So I will pop a timer up on the screen for 1 minute, and then we will share the Padlet and share some of the ideas that are coming in from it. there's our minute up. I'm going to invite my colleague Bridget now to perhaps share some of the ideas that came in from the Padlet there. Bridget, if you're in a position to do so, that'd be great.
Absolutely, thanks Sonia, and lovely to be here tonight. Welcome everybody. So you can hopefully see yourself what's been fed in here, what's been typed in. So and we'll just go for the first ones that's grabbing attention there. Students with learning physical disabilities is definitely being mentioned a couple of times. Students with autism and sensory issues, physical difficulties is broadly been popped in there as well. Students who are non-binary is been mentioned, also with students with dyspraxia, learning difficulties, and behavioural difficulties is been mentioned there as well. Behavioural issues has been mentioned a couple of times there as well. Understanding learning outcomes, the students with difficulties understanding, I suppose, which you might think is some understanding instructions, so physical challenges. So we can see that there is a whole broad spectrum of issues being mentioned here, being referred to, physical issues as well. And that is, so I think it's the broad spectrum of issues that we're looking at here and thinking about when we're talking about inclusive practice here.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much, Bridget, and thanks everybody for your ideas there and for sharing at this time. We will visit the Padlet page a couple more times throughout the session, again, to collate our ideas. But as you can see, our interpretation of inclusion is quite broad already. So when we're thinking about inclusion, we're already thinking about the broad spectrum of learners. Like we saw from that activity that loads of different individual students or groups of students are coming to mind for different teachers. So that's really interesting for us in the context of this evening's webinar. So I suppose our rationale for putting on this event this evening, I suppose everything we do at Junior Cycle for teachers, it responds to the needs of schools and the needs of teachers, and we really rely heavily on the feedback from previous events to inform future events. So you might remember last year's cluster, we had 3 sessions in the day, and session 3 centered around inclusive practice, and we really focused in at this session on the students who are following the level 2 learning programs. But when we asked for feedback following that cluster event last year, teachers told us that they really would love more CPD around this area, or more collaboration and sharing of good ideas, of good practice in this area. So I suppose that's what we're grounding this evening in. That's why we put this evening's event on, is to respond to that feedback. I suppose if anybody wasn't at last year's CPD, all of the materials from it are on our jct.ie website page if you go to Wellbeing and Physical Education. And we also have a webinar from last year's OLE event, which centred around the level 2 learners who were involved in the mainstream PE class. So I suppose that's what we're grounding our work in this evening. And you can see those resources being popped into the chat there. So I suppose grounding our work is always the framework for Junior Cycle 2015. It guides everything that we're doing at Junior Cycle, and we're taking our mind back to the 8 principles of Junior Cycle. And you don't need me to go through all 8 of these principles. They've been covered many, many times before, but we're going to focus in on this one, which is inclusive education. And we know that inclusive education advises us that the educational experience is inclusive of all students, and it contributes to the equality of opportunity, participation and outcomes for all. So again, further grounding this inclusive education piece in our rationale and our framework for Junior Cycle, we know that this is a quote taken from page 36 of the framework that was published in 2015, and it's the kind of second half of this quote which is most pertinent for us in this space. It's ensuring that the learning opportunities are as accessible as possible for all students, and we know that the statements about the skills have been developed and articulated in a way that reflects this variety in our students, in the students that we teach. So we know that students come from a wide variety of individual circumstances. I suppose we're further grounding what we're doing in the Looking at Our Schools document, which was updated this year in 2022 in August. Now, this is a quality framework for post-primary schools. It supports us for planning for inclusion by using the standards and statements for teachers' individual practice. So we know that we have two domains. We have the teaching and learning and teaching domain, and then we have the leadership domain. And within that, they're split down into the four areas, the dimensions, and the domains, the standards, and then the statements of practice. And we know that we have statements of practice that show what effective practice are, and statements of highly effective practice. So we see an example of this on the next page, so the next slide, pardon me. So an example coming from the Looking at Our Schools document here, linking where to start planning to standards and statements as described in LEAS 2022, making connections with how this can help us plan for inclusion for all learners. So this can be used for school self-evaluation also. So I'm just going to pause for a moment because I'm speaking very fast and maybe not giving you an opportunity to read what's on the slides. So I'm just going to pause for a moment to allow you just to take in some of the statements for effective practice and highly effective practice that we see on the screen here. Okay, so moving on, we're going to look at what we're going to do in this session this evening. So where are we starting? So we're hoping, that by this evening, we're going to consider a number of factors. And we know that the area of inclusive education is very broad, and it encompasses learners across a continuum, from those who need help to access the curriculum to those who are at risk of being excluded for a variety of reasons. So we're going to consider, how does design for inclusive education benefit all students? We're going to consider why inclusion is important and the reasons that we are making sure that our practice is inclusive. And then we're also going to discuss what changes in our practice could we make to potentially improve learning for all students. Okay, so that's all of our students that we are teaching at Junior Cycle. So as this is a JCT event, we're looking at the Junior Cycle specifically. I suppose when we're looking at the Junior Cycle, we're thinking about all learners who are accessing their various programs or specifications or curriculum under the National Framework of Qualifications here. So we know that at Junior Cycle, we may have students who are accessing the learning at level 1, they may be accessing the learning at level 2, or they may be accessing the learning at level 3. And we know that this is where they sit within the National Framework of Qualification, which goes from level 1 right up to level 10. And I suppose we're acknowledging as well how important it is that we know that students learn at a level that is appropriate for their needs, but also that they're challenged to reach their full potential. So we know that a student can engage with all aspects of Junior Cycle, whether that is level 1, level 2, or at level 3. So that's kind of the broader piece of the Junior Cycle framework and at the specifications that the students are following at this level. I suppose we are focusing this evening primarily on physical education, obviously. So important to acknowledge where we're at in terms of our various curricula at Junior Cycle for PE. So as you know, there are currently 4 curricular options for physical education at Junior Cycle. Circular 59/2021 gives us our most up-to-date guidance on this area. Now, we do expect this to change. We expect that there will be a new circular, more than likely in November. But at the moment, Circular 59/2021 is our most up-to-date guidance. So these are the 4 curricular options that we have for Junior Cycle. And the advice we have in this space is that schools and school management and school leadership will decide the curricular option which best meets the needs of the students in their own specific school context. So, that's a school-based decision which program a school is going to follow within this area. But we do know that the NCCA has prepared a specification for 135 hours for physical education. We know that the new specification has gone through the phase of consultation. We know it has been signed by council, and we have recently heard that it has been signed by the minister. So we expect that this specification will be published imminently, and we are really excited for the publication and implementation of this new programme for physical education at Junior Cycle. When exactly it's going to be published, we do not know. We don't have access to that information, but we expect it imminently. So I'm going to invite you now again to navigate the Padlet for the second time this evening. So this time we are looking at activity 2, And we're going to consider here now, how does planning using an inclusive approach improve outcomes for all students within our class? So we've purposely kind of kept this considerably broad. We're not just focusing on the knowledge or skills here. So we're going to invite you to navigate to that Padlet again, the QR code you can see on screen, and we're going to put the link into the chat also. And I'm just going to set the timer for 1 minute to allow us some time to just consider this question and reflect upon it before we move to taking some feedback.
Sorry, Anya, just Jared here. So Anya, we might just set the time maybe for 2 or 3 minutes, maybe on this one, just a little longer of a question.
Yeah.
Just if we can give it maybe 3 if we can.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Perfect. So we're just coming to the last couple of seconds of this activity. So I'm just going to stop our timer now, and I'm going to invite Bridget if she's in a position just to join us, and maybe we'll share some of the feedback that came in on the Padlet page for that activity. Bridget, would you like to share some of the feedback there, or will I?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was waiting for and there's just an overwhelming positive comments around the importance of just enjoyment, fun, sense of success, learning about themselves, no one left out, just enjoyment of engagement, the enjoyment through movement, really everything there, and that also the rights of the child, that that was one that every child has the right to an education, as we know. And we know the UN Charter certainly informs us very clearly that every child has a right to an education, an appropriate education, and that includes as well, of course, physical education. So you can see, read down through yourself. I said they're the ones that overwhelmingly stand out about the sense of enjoyment, the sense of fun, the opportunity to experience that sense of fun, enjoyment, engagement and opportunity, and that allows them then to develop their sense of self, as well as being able to learn about, you know, the joy of movement and the importance of participation in physical activity, and how that can contribute then to your health, and to try and hopefully helping to make that connection between the importance of physical activity and health, and how that is connected with health and hopefully lifelong engagement.
Thanks, Bridget, and thank you to everybody for the contributions there. Some really rich comments coming in there on the Padlet page, and it's nice for us to see how other people are engaging with it. You know, we're seeing some themes emerging across the comments, and then we're seeing also some differences as well. So that's really, really nice. Thank you so much for engaging with that activity, folks. I'm now going to invite our first panelist for this evening to join us. So I'm just going to introduce Molly. I'm sure she'll introduce herself as well. So we might be familiar with Molly's work. I suppose she was involved with our CPD last year. So Molly is a PE teacher in Merlin College, County Galway. I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit about her school context when she introduces herself. But I suppose during last year's cluster event, Molly shared some of her practice very generously along with her colleague Aidan O'Sullivan, and we were introduced to a concept called tiered learning. Now, we saw a snippet of the practice of tiered learning in the videos from the Cluster CPD last year, but I suppose we got such positive feedback from these videos. Teachers really enjoyed it, really engaged with this concept and took a lot of learning from it, that we said it would be really nice to follow up with Molly. First of all, to see how this concept came about in the beginning, or why she chose to teach in this way, and has the concept changed much since we last heard from her in Merlin College. Molly, if you're in a position to unmute now, please do so, and I will just move through the slides that you've shared with me.
Thanks, Sonia. Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Molly Nightingale, and I'm working in Merlin College here in Galway. Yeah, so basically tiered learning came from actually when I was on placement, and I would have had a good bit of expertise in gymnastics, and I was on placement, and I'd been asked as I guess my supervising teacher to teach gymnastics. And first of all, I kind of looked at the really mixed ability group that I was working with, and I kind of thought, geez, how am I going to teach gymnastics to this group? I had kids who were doing gymnastics, attending one of the best clubs in Galway, and able to do quite a lot, to kids who, you know, that were less able in that area, and probably had never tried gymnastics at all in their life. So that's where it came from at the start. I was thinking, okay, well, how can I keep the less able students in the gymnastics area you know, able to access the curriculum, while also I suppose keeping the more able students motivated and moving along. So yeah, basically access to the curriculum for all is where it kind of came from. When I never talked too much about the tiered learning kind of method that I came up with after that. And then I came to Merlin College here a good few years later. And in Merlin College, we have a huge mixture of types of students. So from different cultural backgrounds, different diversity, really strong LGBT committee, SEN students, and again, we're also a DEIS school, so you can only imagine the range of students we have here. And I thought, like, there was a couple of classes where you'd have a lot of students with different learning difficulties or physical difficulties, and I was, how am I going to teach these? So that brought me back to the tiered learning process again. I thought back, like, when was I in this situation before? And I really found that this particular model that I was using really worked well for my students with SEN, or within students that, you know, have autism or, you know, any sort of learning difficulty along that. And we would have a great amount of students that are accessing mainstream that could be linked to an ASD centre. So yeah, so that's where I went to with that, and I used that then, and I started originally the tiered learning kind of model that I was using was within gymnastics. And I started using it and embedding it then into more different different strands. So I started using it in soccer, as you would have seen in the video from last year. I started using it in basketball, and it just provides the opportunity for all students to learn at their own rate, which I just found the most valuable from the tiered learning. And again, at their own comfort level. I just had that there. A lot of students, you know, tended to be uncomfortable with different skills, and at the time, you know, if I wasn't using the tiered learning process, they felt like it was in front of other students. So I do find that the tiered learning model kind of provides that opportunity for students to kind of you know, learn without feeling like they're being watched, you know, because everyone's working at their own rate, so all the kids are quite occupied. And again, it made them a little bit more accountable, you know, by each different level. So in terms of the tiered learning model, if you're familiar from the video last year, there's lots of different levels and students can access any level. They don't have to particularly start at the start, depending on safety. So gymnastics, I usually encourage that they start at the first level, and they were able to say, well, I can definitely do that, so I can tick the box and move on. And then in other kind of sports like soccer and stuff, I wasn't as kind of inclined to get them to start at the first level. It was more getting them to start at the level that they felt challenged or comfortable at. Yeah, Anya, so we can move on to the, yeah, so then I suppose a way that I've developed it since the video last is I started actually, you know, if you have ICT or the students have any access to ICT, we have a small amount of iPads for our LCPE this year. So I developed a little bit of ICT into it. So you can see there the task card for gymnastics, that's learning the cartwheel there. So on my one, I have my own personal links to videos that they can look at that will demonstrate myself or another person doing each of these levels. So for students with SEN that I guess, you know, kind of need that reinforcement of a demonstration, or that reinforcement of kind of maybe even just different cues, they can go back and click on the link there, and that will give them the opportunity to access the curriculum again at their own rate, their own level, without having to take it all in the demonstration and instruction. And then again, just student accountability, they're ticking as they go. You're able to kind of come back and say, hold on, can you show me level 3? Have you done level 3 or whatever, so on and so forth. You could also use it as an assessment model as well. You know, it's not that in depth, but again, you can have that as a bit of data to show that each student has accessed that particular curriculum, or you can see what level they're at. So if you do gymnastics the following year, you have an idea of where your students lie. And then there's another huge benefit of developing independent learners, which we all know, you know, you'll get in some groups and you won't always get in others. So it is a great skill if you kind of change it up a little bit and maybe make it a little bit, adapt it to a bit smaller of that. But yeah, we can move on then to the next one. So again, I think I've hit on a good few of these, like why it works. I find, you know, allows students to access the curriculum at their own rate and comfort levels, as I said, provides for more able students. So again, you know, when you have a lot of students with a lot of SEN needs or additional needs within your class, I know some of the more able students, in my experience, can get a little bit frustrated at times. So I guess it provides that and eliminates that problem. And again, it just provides support for each student at levels. Again, additional needs within mainstream, especially enhancing engagement and developing skills such as I said, accountability and independent learners. And we can go on to the next one then. Yeah, so we all know that it does, like, one model doesn't fit all. We know we can all face challenges in certain things. So I'm not going to go out and say, well, this tiered learning model is great and, you know, no matter who uses it, it'll work. But that's not the case. Because I face challenges myself, and I face challenges in the school I'm in with this particular tiered model. And some of the challenges that I would have faced, like, is, you know, if I'm trying a new model, I've learned myself, like, don't particularly maybe use an activity that like, if you know your students and you know they're not going to buy into a particular activity, well, then don't try a new model or a new strategy or curriculum model or something like that with a new activity. Because I had one particular group of students where I was doing the gymnastics, where originally where the tiered model came from, and I came away from the class and it didn't go well at all. And I was just thinking, like, what went wrong there now? Why has this worked for other students and not for this particular group with huge amount of needs, huge behavioral issues, loads going on? But it was actually, in fact, well, from my own reflective practice, it was down to the particular activity. So gymnastics just wasn't a good activity for this particular group. They weren't buying into it, and it was a poor choice of activity to lead out with this tiered model. So if it doesn't work with another activity, try it with something else. And again, another particular group, slightly different to this group, I came across that they actually weren't independent learners, and it came to me that it kind of looked like they hadn't the skills to be independent learners. It was like they didn't know how to move on to the next level. They didn't know that they could access, you know, the middle level without having to go to 1, 2, and 3. And I ended up having massive clusters of students at one level. And I found as well that some students were clustering together with their friends, even though they might have been more able or less able. And it was having a huge knock-on effect on all of the students learning. So I guess what I did with that was I just looked at kind of how can I break this down to really minor elements and maybe make it the whole thing much more simple so that I could actually teach independent learning rather than trying to hit them with a new model and so on and so forth. So again, if it doesn't work, you know, it's not the answer for everything, but do give it a try. Maybe change up the group or change up the activity or whatever that may be. But yeah, that's all I have for you this evening. And if you have any questions, throw them at us.
Molly, thank you so much for sharing aspects of your practice there. And I think the really rich message that I took from your piece this evening was the power of reflection. And I think we talk a lot about student reflection and the student reflection around assessment moments or CBAs. But I think what I really took from your piece there was the power of the teacher reflection as well, and saying, okay, if it worked, why? And if it didn't work, also why? So maybe stripping it back to the skills that the students needed from that. I think that's really powerful. And before we invite our next guest speaker, I might ask if you would like just to take a moment to jot down any thoughts that came to mind, maybe any questions you might have from Molly, just on pen and paper. We won't move to the Padlet for this activity, so just take a reflective moment before we move into our next guest speaker, and maybe just take down anything that came to mind when we heard from Molly. So thanks so much, Molly, for that. And I know Molly's going to be with us until later in the evening, and we will have a Q&A section. So if anybody has any questions for Molly, she'll be with us until the end of the evening. With that, I'm going to move on to our next panelist this evening. So we're delighted to have one of our associates on board with us this evening. So Aoife Linnane is working in Step Aside Educate Together Secondary School in County Dublin. Again, Aoife is a PE teacher and she's an associate with the JCT. So Aoife's going to give us some of the insights from her specific school context, again, which is quite different to Molly's, although I'm sure there are parallels also. So I'd like to invite Aoife to unmute and maybe introduce herself, and I'll bring up the slide there then for Aoife.
Lovely, thanks Sonia. Hi everyone, good evening. I'm sure everyone's quite tired after a long day at work. So I'm just going to go through what students at our school at the moment value about physical education. So we designed a PE policy. I designed it with the principal at the beginning of the year. We're an Educate Together school, so students don't have a school uniform, and therefore they don't have a PE uniform. So we thought that a policy will be necessary for students to kind of know what to wear for PE, but also as an opportunity to kind of set out the rationale for PE and expectation as well. So for example, if students aren't dressed performance ready, which is what we called it, what the escalation process was, the flight path, etc. We asked all students to wear attire that they felt comfortable in, and that they could exercise in. We did a session on sports bras for the female students in our school. We actually did it as well in front of the males as well, so that we kind of, everyone was being treated like adults. We talked about obviously doing PE outside, so we've no facilities at school. So we rely on good relationships with the council, who've been very good to us. So we use their pitches during lessons. So we talk to students about bringing in spare footwear, obviously like spare socks, and just keeping their hygiene on point as well. So this was all set out in the PE policy, which we named Performance Ready, and every year ahead would have presented the synopsis of the policy, or an abstract really from it, during a settling in meeting with parents at the beginning of the year. And as well, so it was great to be able to email it out to parents, obviously put it on our school website, but also for year heads just to talk through the rationale. So obviously we want your children to be wearing appropriate attire for PE. Trainers are an absolute must. And then we talked about the different types of trainers. And then obviously the flight path, and it's been well received, I have to say. So just by, you know, that clear line of communication. So again, in the rationale was talking about the saying that we use in PE, which is listen to your body. And the reason is because originally we were teaching LCPE, we brought it in last year, and there's a lot of work around, you know, ramp warm-ups, so raise, activate, mobilize, and potentiate, and a huge amount as well around proprioception, so feedback from the body. And that is the dream, I suppose. It's the dream for all students to become independent in their learning, to be able to warm themselves up safely with sport-specific exercises. And we were quite nervous about having students who would potentially, you know, kick back and push back at this, and parents as well. So we kind of have come up with this mantra of listen to your body, where we ask students to work at a particular percentage of their max. So for example, in a ramp warm-up at the raise stage, we'd ask them to work between 50 to 60% of their maximum speed. And in a session I was in recently, another teacher asked me, well, how do you teach that? How does a child know what their 50% is? And it's a brilliant question. So we set out students, obviously at the beginning of the year, we warm them up, and we get them we obviously educate them about their heart rate, their breathing rate, and we get them to find their max. And then we get them to scale it back and to find their 50 of it. So you can use that during like timed sprints, you know, like the rhythm of their footwork, again, their breathing rate, because we want students to be able to warm up safely in the right zones, the correct heart rate zones as well. And I have to say, when students come in saying they're on their period, or when boys come in saying I'm injured, it's nice to be able to say, look, our mantra in PE is you listen to your body. So students automatically think, right, where's the injury? Where's the niggle? What can I try? And, you know, that could be as well in activities as well. This isn't just a warm-up in the warm-up. So I would say if we didn't have this mantra, we'd probably have about 3 sick notes or 3 notes per lesson. But because we have this mantra, it lets the students and the parents and all people in the community know that our aim is for students to be able to become more self-regulated in their learning, and that is in becoming more in tune with their bodies. So for example, during the warm-up, you should, in the raise section, you should be able to have a conversation with the person beside you. So that's your 50. We also talk about how we don't compare students and their current abilities or their progress to one another. So we ask students to find their 50. We also do pacing exercises, just to really, especially with first years, just to really kind of allow them those opportunities to find their 50. So again, all of this is in that Performance Ready policy. And again, if a parent emails saying my child has or my child is not feeling very well today, could you please excuse them from PE? Well, we say that obviously if a student is well enough to come into school, they're well enough to do PE, but we ask them to please listen to their bodies throughout the lesson. And the parents are actually really grateful. They really support it. So on that note, we talk about individual pathways to success. So if we have a student in a lesson who loves basketball, they're living their best lives, we direct them and also pop an email to the parent and just say, look, obviously, please come and join our after school clubs. We also have affiliated clubs for every sport. So again, we're a growing school. We reached out to our local clubs, so our local GAA club, our local health and fitness club, our local rugby club, football club, and athletics club. And we asked them if we could put their contact details on our website. So if we have even a school club player who wants to join the rugby team, like De La Salle, they just contact our contact, like Norman, immediately. They also do PE takeovers, so it's nice for them to get to see the faces of our local clubs. And again, it's just building that culture of sport across school. So it's not just obviously being a performer in the lessons. We do use a sport ed model where there are a variety of roles in the lesson. I know this is something that we all do, we all tap into, but it works. So giving them like a role as such as being obviously the referee, the coach, an equipment manager, or a statistician. So they work on, if you're doing rolling tournaments, rolling leagues, they put the board together, the tournament together, and they look at the scoring systems, or they can use normative data in the lesson to, you know, measure the attempts versus the successes. And as well, what really works is when students do have, they're on a rehab program with the physio, we ask them to use our PE time to rehab and to carry out their exercises. And again, parents are highly appreciative of that. So that the child is still working towards returning to PE and returning to sport. And then obviously during the lessons, it's again something that we all know. We all had that teacher, and those teachers that we knew always had our best interests at heart and worked really well with us. Our PE department, we work well at trying to invest in the relationships with the kids, and to really try and get them to look at PE as their well-being. So obviously it's a subject that we all teach, we all adore, we're so passionate about. But if this child is struggling in 6th year or in 5th year, 4th year, 3rd year, any year, with any stresses in their lives, it's great to kind of teach them how to regulate their body to manage that stress, so that they see that PE and exercise isn't just those 58 minutes that they have with us or those 60 minutes. It's for life. And again, our big picture is for students to be able to go to the gym outside of school, or you know, do a 5K run or a park run, and they know exactly how to warm themselves up, but as well how to be in touch with their bodies as they're running. So if their breathing rate is just becoming out of control, how to regulate that. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, obviously pop them through. But that's just at our school how we worked with the context that we're in, and what's working well. I'm sure it could be a different story again in 2 or 3 years, but at the moment this is working for us. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much, Aoife, for joining us this evening and for sharing these aspects of your practice. And I think there's something there for everybody. We can all take something from that. But what I'm really hearing from what you're saying is meeting the needs of the students of where they're at, okay, and the unique context of your school, the diversity of the students, and meeting their needs and having those conversations. It's very rich to hear about this in your practice, and I can hear it from the passion in your voice about how this is really happening. So again, just like with Molly, we're going to invite you now to our participants on the call this evening, just to take a moment or two to jot down any reflections that you may have after hearing from Aoife. And I suppose if you have any questions for either Aoife or Molly, feel free to pop them into the QA section on the chat, and we will come to them at the end of the evening. But just take a moment to reflect upon that, because there really is a lot there to digest of really, really rich stuff. So our third contributor this evening was unable to join us live, but we are very grateful to Emma Carey for joining us virtually. So she has sent us a piece here for us to consider, and I suppose this is an audio piece which provides like a stimulus for us. So I suppose by Emma speaking to us and telling us about the needs of the students in her own specific context, what we hope that this brings out is an opportunity for us to reflect upon what we have in common, or maybe what is different from Emma's context to our own specific school. So we're just going to hear this voice piece from Emma, and we thank her for sending this in. And we also, in the nature of being inclusive this evening, we've provided subtitles on the audio piece just to make sure that everybody can access what's happening here.
Some challenges that I've noticed in terms of students participating in physical education in my school would be anxiety around their own ability, anxiety around changing rooms and bringing their gear, anxiety around body image, particularly as students progress to the senior cycle, injuries, whether they be short or long term. How do I keep those kids still involved in the class? Special educational needs, students with DCD that have coordination difficulties, but also students in a wheelchair that maybe can't access facilities such as in my own scenario, a gym that's upstairs. I've also noticed that a lack of parental or kind of an influence from home has a major role to play if students are not involved in sports or maybe in a club outside of school, or they're not used to being as active outside of school. This has a major knock-on effect on their maybe willingness and enthusiasm to be involved in class or participate in class.
And again, we thank Emma for that contribution and for sharing that audio stimulus with us that just kind of allows us a moment to pause and to reflect and to think about what we may have in common and what maybe is different. So we're thinking not just about the challenges, we're thinking about the ways that we will overcome these challenges. So it's about what have we done in the past or what maybe we could do in the future that would improve outcomes for all students in our own specific school context.
Some challenges.
So we have some ideas here that have been collated by our fabulous physical education associates here at JCT. So I'm just going to pause for a moment. We've heard a lot of audio stimulus in the last while. So I'm going to pause for a moment to allow us just some time to read through these ideas that were shared with us. We asked our associates to give us ideas on what would improve inclusion in the PE class. So here's what they came up with. And hopefully just by taking a moment to pause and reflect and to read through these ideas, you might think of something that maybe actually sparks an interest. And you think, oh God, I haven't tried that in a while, or, it's been a while since I've thought along those lines. So hopefully something will just be useful there that you'll take away from this evening. We're going to now visit a video that we're just going to watch a few moments of, and hopefully the video will go okay. It was being a bit glitchy earlier, so we kind of have our fingers crossed that it won't be too jumpy on us. But I suppose they're ideas that have been collated by PE teacher educators in a college in the States on making a physical education lesson really inclusive and as a result really fun. So there's nothing majorly new in this video that we're going to watch, but there are ideas that maybe we haven't seen in a while, and hopefully by seeing a couple of new things they'll actually spark your interest and go, oh yeah, I did that before, and when I did it I also did this other thing. So we're going to watch a couple of minutes of this video and we'll share the link in the chat so that anybody who maybe doesn't have access to the video can maybe watch it in your own time later.
Here we have different activities you can do in your next physical education class.
Go! Nope. Oh, that was close.
create bases, and behind the bases they lay prone on their stomachs while the other team tries to throw their balls and knock down the bases. If your base gets knocked down, you simply go over to the side, perform 20 ins and outs, or you can perform any other activity to the side, and when you're done with that, you go back, make your base. Size ball and trying to get the ball across the line and score a point.
Bring the ball on the bounce so it doesn't fall.
That way, it's easier to maintain the balance. Oh, touch, fell in the river. Josh McClung is shut now.
Okay, so again, there's lots of ideas shared there. Most of them are not new. Many of them you may be already using in some form or another, but we're thinking about the planning, the organisation and the learning progression that's important for inclusion for all learners here. So you're considering here, as you watched the video, in what ways were the physical activities inclusive and progressive for all learners? So we're thinking about adaptations that contribute to progression in learning in an inclusive way. So we're focusing on physical activity that's fun, it's accessible for all learners, regardless of their ability, their skill level or their interests, and adapting equipment that has multifunctional use and that's easy to use. So if we just maybe take a moment just to jot down those ideas that you took from that video there, in what ways were the physical activities inclusive and progressive for all learners? We might just take a minute for this activity and we might identify one adaptation that progresses learning in an inclusive way. So just have a think about this in a personal reflection. And now that we've kind of had that moment for personal reflection, that pause to think, we're going to invite you to navigate the Padlet. And this is kind of for the last time this evening. We're going to activity 3. So we're thinking about the contributions that we've had from Aoife and Molly and Emma, and we're thinking about the video that we just saw and all of the grounding in terms of the framework, in terms of the curricular options, in terms of the looking at our schools documents. We're thinking about all of these things that we have considered so far this evening, and we're going to set ourselves a SMART goal. So as a result of this evening's event, describe one change in your practice that you will make to potentially improve learning for all. And we're going to put a time frame on this, as all SMART goals, you know, they have a time frame. So we're going to say something that you're going to do in the next month. So a takeaway action from this evening's event. So if we take one action from the event this evening, and I think it could lead to something really rich, a ripple effect across schools all around the country. So we'll invite you to visit the Padlet page. We might pop the link for the Padlet in one more time, Bridget, if that's okay. And we'll populate activity 3 in the Padlet page there. So as the feedback's coming in, Bridget, would you like just to share any of the approaches that's coming in there on the Padlet page?
Sorry, say that again, Anya. The Padlet,
Yeah, so just some of the feedback that's coming from the Padlet page here.
of course, yeah. Right, so you can see kind of challenge by choice. I like that. I like what it suggests. Listen to your body, and that's so important. I mean, students getting to know, know their limits, but getting, to know what their needs as well, and how that again is connected to health and well-being, and in the context of, that making that connection to how activity and exercise and physical activity affects your heart rate, how it affects your, you can measure that yourself quite easily, and just drawing the attention to that. And that can be done so simply at the start of a lesson as they're moving through the activities, and they can feel the impact of different types of exercises and different types of activity on their heart rate. So really simple way of just helping them get in tune with their bodies. The tiered learning is getting a mention there as well. So outcomes, it's improving. So we're talking about improving outcomes for all learners. Task cards are also mentioned there. I know that Molly has described them very nicely earlier. So discuss with students and implement a more listen to your body approach. I know that Aoife certainly mentioned that as well in her piece there earlier, and allowing students who are rehabilitating to do their physio exercises. So being aware of where students are as well, meeting the students where they are, and just making that, even that small little kind of touch in with identifying, recognizing and remembering even that your student is maybe recovering from an injury or an illness, and just making that connection with students. So making awareness of where your body is, the connection between that and your own physical well-being. It's such an important message, such a strong message, and we know from PE, physical education, as one of the main pillars of well-being, and just helping students to make those connections.
That's super. Thanks so much, Bridget, and thanks everybody for all of the actions that have been targeted there this evening. And I think we'll have lots of positive ripple effects from the ideas shared this evening. So thanks so much for that. So just as we kind of come to the conclusion, I'd like to draw your attention to the final column on the Padlet page is a collation of resources. So we might share some of these into the chat as well. You'll see there's a PDF here which might be familiar to some, but it might be some of us as well. So this is a PDF which is really useful on, I suppose, interactive resources that are useful for specific situations. So you may not have a student at the moment with either a visual or a hearing impairment, but you might have sometime in the future. So this PDF is really useful because it has loads of resources on each of these conditions, or different individual situations. So it's a very good resource, and we're delighted to be able to share it with thanks to the INTO. Then some further training and education in this space that you might like to engage with. So CARA Sport Inclusion Ireland is based in Tralee, and they offer really good training in adapted physical activity. So CARA Sport Inclusion Ireland is great. We also have Middletown Centre for Autism, which is an all-island resource, but the CPD offered from Middletown Centre for Autism is absolutely fantastic. We highly recommend it, and it can be engaged with online or in a face-to-face capacity. And then Sport Ireland participation. So PE teachers, most of us are familiar with our local sports partnership. So it's also worth being just taking note of the fact that your local sports partnership will have an inclusion officer, and the remit of that inclusion officer will be to offer training and CPD and opportunities for professionals that are working with people with disabilities on how to provide further opportunities for inclusion for those people. So the inclusion officer with your local sports partnership is definitely a person to keep in mind if you're looking for further CPD in this area, or just have a chat with about ideas of different sports that can be included for them in their programme. We're also just going to give a nod to some of the previous resources that have been offered by the JCT. So you see a slide here taken from our 2019 CPD booklet. Its original source is the Sport Ireland. So adapting activities to different abilities. We have two models that we use a lot, the tree model and the step model. They're fairly self-explanatory. You don't need me to go through them again because we have covered them in CPD events before, but they're really, really good. And it's just a reminder of those models in case we haven't seen them in a while, that they just can be really, really useful for us in that context. So if you'd like to scan the QR code, that would bring you straight to that booklet, and you might like to have a copy of that for your own use. So we're just kind of coming towards 6 o'clock now. I suppose we have an opportunity now to ask any questions if anybody has anything that they'd like to put to the panel. Did anything come in there, Jared or Bridget, that was for any of our panelists?
Yeah, no, there was a few questions, I suppose, over the night about Bridget, and I have been busy in the background replying to people as they went along. But just to give you a flavour of some of the kind of questions that come in, there was some questions around specific equipment. What equipment would we buy for our students? So, you know, it's very hard to comment on the types of equipment without knowing the background for students. But there was, I suppose, any suggestions on good equipment, or even how to modify or use equipment, existing equipment, in different ways to cater for students who have maybe in wheelchairs or special needs, special education needs?
Yeah, so I suppose I'll come in on this. First of all, maybe we will go to, you know, the Department of Education has a PE equipment list, which is really useful, and it's great to have that. But I suppose this question is centered around adapted PE equipment. And I would always find that, you know, looking at the individual student that you have in front of you and seeing what are their specific needs, and then adapting from there can be really useful. So, you know, we have lots of adapted pieces of equipment. For example, like, you know, we have the gymnastics mats with an incline that can help us with forward rolls or pencil rolls, and they're really useful. But perhaps that's not what the student needs. Perhaps they're actually fine with the gymnastic rolls. They need something in other ways. So, you know, there's loads of ideas out there. I have shared a list from last year's event that might be useful for some of us, and it's a lot of really practical ideas. It doesn't have to be very expensive, fancy equipment. It could be just as simple as, you know, if you have students who are, you know, you have a class that's playing badminton, you might offer a number of students the option of using the foam shuttlecock rather than the plastic shuttlecock, because we know the foam shuttlecock travels through the air slower, so they have more time to get to it. Or you might offer them the option of having a larger racket, so there's a greater surface area, so they have more chance of making contact with the shuttlecock. So it's, again, being creative and thinking outside the box there.
Very good. And there was another question then in around the Padlet that we're using tonight. Will it be available to download or access, or are we keeping it live for a long time? But I think everyone has the link to it. So we'll probably keep it live and let people link to it and use it. There, everyone has the link again.
Yeah, and all those links to the CPD and to the training, to the resources, are all populated into column 4, and there's loads of ideas there that might be useful for some people. So again, this will be live. We will this webinar is recorded. It'll be on our jct.ie website in a couple of days, and we'll make sure to upload the Padlet page alongside it as a resource there.
Very good. And just before I hand over to Bridget for maybe the last question, it was just to promote our newly launched Twitter page. So if you want to follow the new JCT_PE Twitter page, we'd love it if you give us a like and a share. And yeah, we're constantly looking for new and innovative ideas around the PE space to promote in that space. So yeah, just to let you know, that's a new page you might like to follow.
I know we're almost out of time. I suppose the easiest thing for me to point you in the direction of is the Padlet page, indeed. And as I said, the link will be live and available, and you have it there. We have, both Anya, myself and Ger have popped in lots of links over the last while there for adapted physical activity resources. That short video that you saw there is just one of them, and even from that you can see how they're using equipment and the multifunctional use of really simple pieces of equipment that are also quite cheap. We did share the link to that the Department of Education equipment list is available, but this, you know, you could see even from the video there how you could just easily use like the thing called Noodle, which the foam roller, and how that could be used in many different ways. Simple thing as a balloon, even to replace a ball, if in the case of where you're working with children with sensitivities, and again getting to know the child and what their needs are and what their sensitivities are, because we know children with autism are hugely diverse spectrum there that you're working with. There are links to books for strategies for inclusion. There's one there in particular that by Lieberman and Houston Wilson, which there's certainly really some lovely ideas in that as well. And we can't not talk about, we know, the UDL, Universal Design for Learning as well in physical education. There's a link there specifically related to that. So I say I won't be able to say that any better than what's in all the links that are shared there at the minute.
That's great. Thanks so much, Bridget. And I suppose a final note on the evening is thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. In particular, our panelists, Aoife and Molly, and not forgetting Emma Carey also. It was really great to hear your voices and hear the teacher voice in this evening's session. And I think we all came away with a lot of food for thought from your contributions, and I really appreciate you giving up your time to join us this evening. And also to everybody who joined us online, thank you for giving up an hour of your time this evening. It's been a joy to discuss these topics with you this evening, and I suppose keep in touch, don't be a stranger, as we've said already. Our website is jct.ie. Our Twitter handle is jct_PE. And if you want to get in contact with either myself, Gerard, or Bridget, if you have any questions, we'd only be more than happy to answer any of them if we're in a position to do so. You can contact us on info@jct.ie. So that's us for the evening, and thank you very much again to everybody, and hopefully we will see you online from November to March at PE clusters.